What's happening with this California flight stuff? Because
Yeah.
I was with Palmer over Christmas and a bunch of other guys from that side. And I didn't know about it. I knew that it was going to be brought in before the end of the year. It's this sort of sticky thing that seems to be following people around, but it's also going to get worse over time. It seems like there's more and more rumblings that stuff's going to keep on. This feels like the sort of core engine of California's prosperity since the 1800s is now unraveling.
Yeah. I'm in a bunch of group chats. I talk to a lot of people. I would say probably a third of people I talk to have already left. You're asking about people leaving, right? And I would say like a survey we did informally in a group, which has been published, talked about is close to 87% of people are going to leave. These are the core leaders in tech. And the other thing is I talk to a lot of emerging tech CEOs of startups that are doing really well, that are growing, and they're all looking to leave. Like there was one company I was talking to, they're going to move up to Northern California from Southern, and they're like, now I'm going to move to Nevada. And that's because they're worried about what's next. So California's in this fundamental like sinkhole right now. It goes back to my point about people making promises. In order to get elected, politicians promise people something that they don't have today. That's how you get elected.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get elected by saying, I'm going to take stuff away from you. The government's going to do less for you. Show me one politician in the last 100 years has been elected saying that. So in order, there's a fundamental kind of like moment, this come to Jesus moment. Can you keep doing these promises? Can you even meet the promises you've already made? And in California, the answer is no. California set up a system where
87% of core tech leaders surveyed are planning to leave California. Let that sink in. The engine that powered the state's entire economy is now walking out the door.
We created the highest tax rate in the country because of all the success in Silicon Valley, all the income that's being generated, all the success and capital gains and whatnot, and use that to fund a bunch of nonsense. The bullet train to nowhere, friggin' like $30 billion in nothing. Like
How much is it?
$30 billion. And they've had 6 CEOs, by the way, that have all been fired, or the one guy just got arrested. It's insane. There's it was just published that this homeless program, $220 million was spent on it. 6 homeless people got themselves out of the cycle of poverty that they were in. You go down the list.
What was it? Sorry, what was that thing about the affordable internet?
Bill? Rural broadband.
That was it. And for the same amount of money that was spent, I think every American citizen could have got Starlink.
Yeah. That one, that's a federal problem.
Yeah. But
you're going to get me very emotional. I've been very like
you seem like an emotional.
I've been
guy.
very like unemotional during our talk about science in the future. And then this is the opposite. Okay, this is the bullshit, the opposite that happens when social systems become manifest like rotten. It's a system where people lie to each other in order to keep themselves in power, in order to keep their money flowing, in order to keep this nonsense up and running. People lie to themselves, they lie to their constituents, and the democracy starts to become like, what's the point? Like, does this even work? California in particular, we made a bunch of changes to the pension system. So we have public pensions for public employees in California. And over the past 12 to 15 years, those changes have resulted in a bunch of guarantees to people on their future retirement benefits that the state simply cannot afford to meet. The estimate currently is that there's $600 billion to $1 trillion in the hole. Okay? The state then has a question, how are we going to like pay for all these people, all the stuff that we promised them?
$30 billion on a bullet train to nowhere with 6 fired CEOs and 1 arrested. $220 million on a homeless program that helped 6 people. This isn't government. This is a money bonfire.
And that's a big part of, and then there's also all the near-term stuff like healthcare costs. Hey, we promised them healthcare. We promised our union workers healthcare. We've got to figure out a way to fund the healthcare because the promises were made. But the promises were never funded. The promises were never possible to be funded. And when suddenly it all comes to roost and everyone's like, well, how are we going to make the payments now? How are we going to fill the hole? That's the situation California's in. California has such a heaping liability problem that it's now, you're seeing like all the rats jumping, off the ship, or they're burning the ship, or the people are leaving the ship. I don't know what the right analogy to use is, but that's the chaos that's ensuing in California in this very moment. And so we talk a lot about the billionaire tax. The billionaire tax came about because of one guy at one union called SEIU UHW, who set up a scheme where they would tax you 5% of your net worth if your net worth is over $1 billion, which everyone in this audience is like, who cares? Screw the billionaires. But what it does is it gives the state assembly, the legislature, the ability to, in the future, change the threshold and the amount. So theoretically, you could take the 5% on billionaires one time and make it 1% on billionaires every year.
Wasn't this the case with the original income tax?
1930, it was 1%.
Tell people the story of how the original income tax...
I mean, the original income tax was pitched because we did not have an income tax in the United States. And that was, again, why this country was founded. It was set up as no taxation without representation. There was a huge tax scheme to fund all of the, nonsense that was going on in England.
Careful now.
I mean, at the time, very different. Not to speak to the people, but the let's call it the aristocracy, and what we call the elites today. And by the way, I think about the term the elites. It's sort of like that Spider-Man meme where like you're the elite, you're the elite, you're the elite. Like the tech guy's the elite. Like that's kind of the moment we're in right now. It's like the tech guys are the elites, but like the tech guys last year they were calling out the NGOs as the elites, and then it's just like everyone's an elite.
Your privilege is more privileged than my privilege.
Yeah, this is all rooted in Marxist philosophies, by the way. It's all this like oppressor-oppressed stuff. Like again, but all of those philosophies fundamentally distinguish people's agency. Like, this is so critical for people to understand. When you give people a bunch of stuff, or you create a governmental system or economic system that says you do X, you get Y, you're a slave to that system. You are now oppressed, no matter what anyone tells you. You are not getting risen up, and pulling other people down doesn't solve any of your problems. Another conversation for another day. But in California, so we started out as and so the way they started the income tax in the United States was they're like, hey, we'll promise everyone 1% on incomes over whatever it was at the time. I think $10,000 a year. You can probably look it up. And that was it. And then over time, it's like, wait, we had to fund a war. So and now we're like going to expand the highway system.
So the original income tax was 1%.
1% on high net worth people, on high earning people. And that's it.
Jared, Chad this and find out how the income tax progressed over time. I want to see
this.
Right.
And you can look at this. And so then it became like suddenly today everyone pays an income tax. In California, I pay 53% income tax. And, most people pay an income tax. And now they're like creating a whole new tax regime. And I want to talk about this.
This is the point that everyone needs to understand. A wealth tax isn't about billionaires. It's about creating the legal precedent to tax your private property. Today, it's 5% on billionaires. Tomorrow, it's 2% on millionaires, and then it's everyone. That's how the high income tax started, 1% on high earners. Now I pay 53%.
Importantly, what they're trying to do in California. Here you go. It was a temporary wartime tax. And, again, leading up to this, we had tariffs to fund the government. The government was small. Like, the government wasn't meant to be this big system that took care of everyone and did all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Keep going.
Coming out of World War II, and here's the income tax started out as 1% on income over $3,000 a year. Okay?
Yep.
And then there was like a progression. They added a 7% top rate later, and then you can kind of see here when the thing kind of expanded.
Oh, wow. 1944 to 1945 in World War II, the top rate was 94%.
Yeah, they took everyone's money to fund the war. But that set a precedent, because what happened at that point is after they set the precedent, and then we had this kind of FDR kind of New Deal expansionism, all the stuff that happened post-World War II in the United States was like, holy crap, we can get the government to do big stuff. Let's do big stuff to make our lives better. You can see that's sound principled. Like, it makes sense. It sounds good in principle. But this is where it leads us to today. Because every year, once you start thinking about the government as solving your problems and doing things for you, that becomes something that only escalates up. It never goes down.
Think about if 51% can vote themselves, what the 49%.
So this is the next thing that happens. So now, so that's income. Let's say you've paid your income tax and you own a bunch of stuff. That's now your private property. You own this stuff. That's yours. So now comes along the government, or this new bill, the Billionaire Tax Act in California. And for the first time ever in the United States, we're trying to create a wealth tax. It doesn't matter that it's billionaires, and it doesn't matter that it's 1% or 5%. What you're saying is that the stuff that you've already paid taxes on, that you now own, that's in your backyard, all your iron ore that you've stored in the backyard.
Correct. Get off it.
Yeah, or your cool, podcast studio. You own these things. You've paid taxes, you've earned your money, and you bought this stuff. But now the government can come in and say, you know what? We want that lamp. We want half your iron ore. We're going to take all your private property from your iron ore. They're going to get all your private property. That's what a wealth tax does. Is it taxes people on post-tax earnings. It takes away private property. If you give the government the ability to do that on even 1% of net worth for billionaires, the next step is 5% of the billionaires or maybe 2% of millionaires. And then maybe it's 3% on people that have a net worth of $100,000 a year. And by the way, to figure out how much you have, what your assets are, you got to send me a list every year of everything you own. So now the government gets to look into your house, not just see what's in your bank account, what stocks you own, but what cars do you own? What's the value of those cars? How much is that art worth? What's everything here worth? Private property rights go out the window when you institute a wealth tax, because now the government has the right to assess all your value and to take anything they want from.
He's not even a billionaire, and he's fired up about this because of what he sees and where it leads. When 51% of voters can just take everything from the other 49%, that's the end of property rights. That's socialism with a ballot box.
You based on a vote where a bunch of people raise their hand and say, we'll increase the tax rate to this, 5%, 2%, 10%, whatever it is, and here's the threshold, and we'll take it every year. And when you do that, it eventually leads to 51% of people voting to take everything from 49%. That's the worst case. Like, that's the end state of this, is it eats itself. And that's socialism. And so I think that a wealth tax, and it's not going to affect me, this California tax. So don't think that I'm trying to speak my book or whatever the comments or bullshits are. I think this is a fundamental principled issue that by degrading private property rights, we are setting a precedent in the United States that is the foundation of why the United States was set up in the first place, which is for all of us that came to this country to get away from tyrannical governments outside the United States that took all our shit and controlled everything and told us what to do all the time. And we came here and we get to have private property. Sure, I'll pay my tax. Here's my 53%. Thank you very much, government, for all the great stuff you do, for all the services you provide. But
fuck off.
Now fuck off and leave me alone. And that's not the case anymore when this passes. Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, all these national politicians, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, they're all saying we need to have a national wealth tax now. So it's not just in California. This is going to be the issue between 2026 and 2028. The elites are the billionaires and the tech people. They're coming after them. And the manifestation of that is to create this wealth tax. And that gives the government the system by which private property rights are gone. And the United States is a very questionable future at that point. That's the thing I worry about the most. And I juxtapose that